Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Well, hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and today I have Cera Impala with us. Cera, thank you for joining us at Spirituality Adventures.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Calvin Arsenia, who has been a regular guest, and we've partnered over the last 3 years. Calvin and I is bringing Cera into Kansas City, or at least you're touring, and that this is a part of your tour, right? Mm-hmm. She will be playing on March 1st at Greenwood Social Hall, which we've already talked about Greenwood Social Hall with Calvin recently. This is a new project, Calvin's. And so I'm excited to welcome you to Kansas City. And it'll be your first trip to Kansas City.
Oh, I can't wait to taste your barbecue.
There we go. We talked about that on the bonus questions. So yeah, had to tell her about Kansas City barbecue. Of course, Kansas City Chiefs are a pretty big deal too. You know, in case you didn't hear, we just won the Super Bowl, so anyway. Kind of a big deal around here, right? Yeah. But yeah, Cera is a singer-songwriter, and I want to read a couple of things that are on Calvin's website for the Greenwood Social Hall. He advertised her honey whiskey honeyed voice takes intimately crafted pieces to another time and place, one of dreams and magic, sensual as they are savage. Her music has been heard all over the world, and Paula has toured internationally with her handpicked band, The New Prohibition. And then in 2019, Cera debuted a new duet project, Delightful Squalor, which I've loved all your music, by the way. I've been listening to all of this the last week. She has previously been a featured member of the Blackberry Bushes, Dark Green Tree, the Dance Bandits, and the fabulous Queens of Sass and Harmony, the Bevy Sisters. Her fifth album of original work, Wildest Dreams, is out on digital platforms and vinyl, right? So
vinyl and CD for all the people doing all the things. Yeah.
We're honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I always like to get a little bit of your origin story, like where you're born, where you grew up. Give us a little sense of your family background, if there was any sort of spiritual component to your family background. Just give us a brief intro to your origin story.
If you're considering a recovering Roman Catholic, a spiritual history, I don't know if I do. I'm half Sicilian on one side, which is where Impala comes from, and I'm half mostly Irish on the other side. And the only reason my parents think we're allowed to marry in 1977 or whatever was because they were both Roman Catholic. You know what I mean? In the States, certain genetic groups stay within their own tribes. And then they've made an exception, I think. And that was 8 bridesmaids in rust-colored chiffon. So spiritual, I don't know, but I know that I think that the new way of being spiritual or not. I mean, I do think through song and through art, like through that, there's the practice these days of a new shamanism in a way, you know, and not to be too big about it, but I think, you know, whether it was John Lennon or, you know, other true artists and stuff, you know, there's the spectrum of singing a jingle, and then there's the song that changes the world, you know. It isn't something, songwriting is something that has been the only way that I can heal myself, and it is a way that I connect with my audience and hopefully bring them to a place in themselves of discovery. It's very important to me to do that. So it is a spiritual journey, but I wouldn't say that it comes from any kind of rearing or, you know, I didn't like sit around and sing in a Shaker church or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Circle songs, right? In the Shaker tradition. Huh.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's just not what, I mean, it was just all kneeling and repentance and feeling guilty and stuff. So no. I'd like to think I don't know. I mean, a lot more people would go to church if the music was better. But I think there's more to spirituality than church. So
I do too. Yeah. You know, I define spirituality as either connection or belonging, or you could even say love to self and to others, connection, and then to something greater, however you might define that, you know. I would leave that up to individuals, you know, to whatever their concept of either God or something greater might be. You know, something connects us to everything, I think. So
music is a huge part of that. And I mean, here in Scotland and there in America, with the Greenwood Social Hall being a great example of that, these churches are being put back into musical dedication. You can't really separate the music and the celebration of that and the connection of that from a spiritual sense of oneness and a connection to the consciousness that we all are, because you're not playing music to get anywhere but in the now. You're playing music and you're hearing it to experience the now more. So what could be more, you know, relevant? And it is really beautiful to see a church turning back into a church, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I love that. Music it seems like it's embedded into the reality of the universe to me. I have a friend who has a PhD in music, but he studied music comp from the mathematical side of music comp. If that, you know what I'm saying? Like, he tells me you can put any music into a mathematical formula, which he codes music for a living. And I'm like going, huh. I remember we were on a bike ride one time and he was telling me.
What do you mean codes music?
Like
he's making algorithms for chord progressions or something?
I'm talking about Tim Place. My producer is more of a musician than I am, but
I mean, all music is math to some, you know, it is, but it's also something else.
He's coding software stuff, you know, like be like if you made stuff for a guitar pedal, you know, that's actually mathematical equation stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm from the opposite.
Right. And I am too, by the way, but it just fascinates me. I think, wow, well, could you put smell into math or music? You know, just my brain goes crazy on that kind of stuff. But music, I think, is hardwired into the universe for sure. And it touches us at a deep, deep level. Where were you born? In
Flagstaff, Arizona.
And that's where, in your growing up years were in Arizona, in America?
Yeah, I lived off and on in California with my father, but mostly, and I've lived in parts of California, but I would consider being from Flagstaff, but I left in 94, you know, so I left when I was like 14.
Yeah. So how do you feel like your growing up years shaped what you're doing now musically?
My mom had a beautiful voice and she played guitar, and I don't know that she had a huge influence on me though, although we probably do share some, you know, vocal cords, whatever, but I do think her taste in music may have affected me. I used to listen to a lot of like Ricky Lee Jones and Hart and, Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that, classic white woman in the 80s stuff. So I feel like those influences and the sound of the Western desert and the sound of, I grew up around Native American culture and stuff. And I've always had a really strong natural love of, like Delta blues, like older, I love Memphis Minnie and I didn't really hear that growing up, but I don't know. I stole my Uncle Rob's tape collection once and I got into the B-52s and the Pixies and, I really like a certain kind of like Zeppelin and things like that, I don't know whatever accidentally happens to a person in their life, but I don't, I haven't reached that like peak middle-aged crisis yet where I'm got the electric guitar down off the wall, but I do have one, I've just always been kind of an acoustic person. Maybe I'm subconsciously always preparing for the apocalypse because I like to know that I can play something completely with the lights being out. I really enjoy acoustic music. So, and I like the freedom of not having to like plug up 10 things in and that kind of stuff. But yeah.
I love it. How about, and so when did you first start playing, and was it guitar? Was that your first instrument?
Well, I'm probably reflective of humanity in that my first instrument's the voice. And I just remember sitting as early as I could with nature and singing myself a song. But I've always been really shy about it. So it did take a long time. Like I wrote songs on guitar when I was 14 and stuff, and had a guitar and just sat and played songs. But to play in front of people, my own stuff, that took quite a long time. I got some jobs in musical theater where I was a character and I could sing quite confidently in a character, but it really took me a lot of time and getting over my nerves and stuff to like play in cafes and stuff when I was, 19, 20 years old. But I was always writing and playing music to myself, but to play in front of other people was another thing. And I do think it's important to note for any listeners out there who feel really shy, because I think if you saw me perform, while there is a vulnerability to my music that is probably its strength, I want people who are trying to overcome their own nerves and stuff to realize that it is sometimes a really long journey to get in front of people and to do that. And I seem a lot more confident than I ever was for years. It's taken me a long time to get over that and to truly let all my broken bits, shine for whatever that means, and be okay with the fact that it's okay to not, I think we spend a lot of time as singers like wanting to sound beautiful or wanting to sound perfect, that we compromise a lot of what our true sound is to be perfect. And I'm very much leaning into not being that way.
Mm-hmm. Where did you first start performing? Where were you at? What part of the country? I got up in front of played at a cafe or something like that.
Yeah, maybe Portland, Oregon, but maybe Olympia, Washington, where I lived for a long time. I moved. I played in New York once, but I picked the wrong key for the piano player. I'll never forget it. I had my friend's dad who ran this theater, made a point to tell me I was a brilliant poet, but just probably should give up the singing thing, which in retrospect was so funny because even I knew at that time that like I had called the wrong key and picked a really complicated song and was very nervous and just a kid, I'll just be like 18. But I don't think if anybody heard me now, they would think that was good advice. Everybody makes mistakes and keep trying,
For sure. So you live in Edinburgh now, and you've been there for 10 years, I think. And what took you out of the States? And I think you went through Berlin to Edinburgh. Is that right?
Yeah, we moved to Berlin from Edinburgh. I don't know how much I should really say, but let's just say that we couldn't go back to the States. And me and my husband were a part of other bands, respectively, and other projects and other life and everything. And we basically liquidated our assets and like moved to Berlin. And then 4 months later, I got knocked up with my son Harlan. And so I just, we just kept doing music thing, freelance thing, and working together in the new Prohibition and going through bass players. And then he started to learn to play gypsy jazz, which took him on a musical journey that I think also affected me and my songwriting. And originally our project was to just, be like an old time band. But at the time I just kept writing and writing more music and becoming more confident in that and creating my own sound and stepping away from, maybe definitively what could be described as psychedelic old time music, which is very popular in the Pacific Northwest. And I think people like it when they hear it in parts of Europe, but when you don't have a bunch of people to like go jam with or play with, it was a very swift changeover to like being much more jazz influenced, I suppose. They took kind of more of a turn, just like indie grass jazz, and then drifting in. It's all good though, because it's all influenced songwriting in different ways. And in a way, there is something to be said, I suppose, for being isolated. But yeah, we moved to Edinburgh because we had a series of like really unfortunate events and like violent attacks and things in Berlin, which it's sort of a hipster playground for expats and Britons and stuff. But there's also kind of a dangerous dark side of Berlin, and a place that still needs healing from the war. And when you're there as like a new mother and all that, and having kind of violent things happen that are ridiculous, I just reminded my husband of a magical dream I had once about a place called Edinburgh that I had never been to before, and maybe we could just investigate and see if there was pals up there for us. And it was very easy. It was very easy. It was very hard. It was very the universe was pointing us that we should be here and live here. So it was a beautiful thing. But 2 international moves in 5 years, on top of like having to move and all the stuff that we've been through, wasn't particularly easy. So I would like to not do that again. Yeah. It'd be great.
What are the things you've fallen in love with in Edinburgh?
Not the council. Arthur Street is beautiful. Even though Glasgow's got a really great cultural vibe going on and lots of great music, it is just a stone's throw over there to visit. Edinburgh needs a bit of work around the edges for that sort of thing, but it is beautiful because it's by the sea. So the nature here, this access is a little more similar to, I crave that because I'm kind of from more, like I don't want to live in a post-industrial town with a freeway going through the middle of it. I prefer to live where there's some trees and rocks and water and things like that remind me of, that make me a little freer. So that's nice. Yeah, I like that.
Excellent. Well, I've loved your music. Your most recent release is Wildest Dreams. And give us a little bit of it's a bit of a concept album, would you say?
Yeah, just by default. I recorded 18 tracks and then peeled it back to 11, 3 of which were fully produced, including the title track, Wildest Dreams, nothing to do with Taylor Swift, who apparently has a track of the same. But Wildest Dreams itself was quite a sad pop tune in a way, indie pop tune that is very melancholy and is but catchy, but it was like, it didn't fit with the rest of the album, which ended up being what it is to have a wild dream and what it is to be wild. And to be wild is to be free and with nature and to have simple things. And when we're wild, I guess we know how to hide ourselves and we know how to lean into what's soft and beautiful and My wildest dreams are like being a mother and being a musician, or having a garden, or, just being aware that I'm lucky or whatever. So that it's not wild in terms of like wild and crazy gal. It's wild. It's my wildest dreams, an acknowledgement of it being like a simple, beautiful human journey, like a reflection of the human condition, I suppose, which sounds like a generic thing that probably all songwriters say. But yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
It's awesome. I love the connection with nature that I hear. Most of the questions that I've asked you I've noticed you've drawn back into nature, and I'm a huge fan. So I pick up on those things. Tell me what nature does for you. How does that inspire you? I was reading a couple of other interviews, and I think you even said that you felt like almost your music almost comes to you, not like it's like it's like you're not the originator even. It comes from a place, then through you, and then through you to others, and then it splinters out into a million ways as people like me hear it. Kind of, I don't know if that's a very good explanation, but nature. Yeah,
it's just like that whole like Khalil Gibran. It's like your children are not your children, and I think that it could be further said like your songs are not your songs. Like just the acknowledgement of just being this channeling force. Like half the songs, at least, that I've written, I don't remember writing, and it feels like this saying that and speaking to that point feels like an acknowledgement of like when I'm in a place to receive these songs, however they come, they genuinely, most of them come like a gift, and they'll usually annoyingly be like, 3/4 of the way done. And then I'll just really have to craft one bit of it. And it's not to say that there hasn't been dedicated musical study along the way, or that I haven't at various points applied myself as, more of a poet, but it is also, it sounds silly to say, but even if it's like watching a series or reading a book or having a conversation, there's an art to kind of everything, and how you absorb the media that you're absorbing and how you think about it. And as I've begun teaching songwriting, I think for a long time I was like, oh, they just come from the ether and I don't know, there's no craft to it. But what I wasn't conscious of when I was challenged to teach songwriting, which I'll also be doing at Greenwood Social Hall with Calvin, just to plug that workshop, is that there is something that I'm doing all the time in the way that I observe the world around me, in the way that I approach my relationship with myself. And sometimes I'm nailing it and sometimes I'm not. And I always feel like, oh gosh, if I haven't written something worthwhile in a while, I'm worthless. I think every artist goes through this kind of like, you're just as good as your last show or your last song or whatever. But I guess to acknowledge that to be possessive about your work on any level is not helpful, and the ego that we have attached to it isn't probably right, because they are just there ready for the grabbing for the most part. But it's like, how do you sort of cleanse yourself and become ready to do that? I don't know that I have or know the answer to that, but I feel very grateful. Because without this art, I would be a different person for sure. It's helpful.
Do you have like maybe one? You said half your songs seem to come from another place. It's like a gift. Is there one or two of them that feel most gifted to you, like in terms of that experience?
Like on that last album?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, like.
I don't know. It's like it's funny because it seems like there's like a few of them. There's just really a few of them. It's funny too, because like in the space of a song, when you feel like you can say something, and this is where songs are really useful to listen to and to write, is that if you feel like you can say something that you can't normally say in your normal life, that's where like a real cathartic power comes in. And there's a song called Feather Boa on the last album that reflects that, where I felt like I couldn't articulate. I felt upset, and so that was something that cathartically helped me through that. But there's really a few. The Mighty Infinite, which seems like a really jazz structured song, and the craft of it probably came from listening to a lot of really structured, A-B jazz music, and so the mental study of that was already there. But the song itself, in terms of the simple poetry and the messaging around it, was like this perfectly distilled piece. That just kind of just was like, whew. And then it came to me before I was visiting people that I felt like I didn't really want to visit. And it kind of, when it dropped in, it was like, oh, you're supposed to feel better. You can feel better. It was like a very mothering, I felt touched by sort of a mother vibe when I remember finishing writing it. So that felt really gifted. Yeah.
Cool. Calvin, by the way, everybody, check Cera will be here in Kansas City. She will be doing a concert. I think it's Friday night, March 1st, if I'm not mistaken, at the Greenwood Social Hall, and several other events that'll be taking place. So check that out. But Calvin was curious about your thoughts on, and it kind of ties into what your answer, that mothering. This one of the songs you felt like came from the gift of mothering. Feminism in the music industry. Calvin was asked me to ask you about that. What's your perspective maybe on feminism in the industry?
It's a big problem. There's a problem. You wouldn't really know that there's a problem because women seem to be splashed on every poster and, represented. Wonder to whose benefit that is, because it's not probably women's benefit in terms of like the larger corporations. But we've definitely got a problem with women leaders, women, like a lack of women's leadership, women's stories, particularly past a certain age. I know that when I turned 40, I kind of turned around and I was alone all of a sudden. As a songwriter, as a band leader, and as an instrumentalist. And that's not that there aren't women players, it's that they've had to make more pragmatic decisions to take care of their families. The music industry as a whole is so impossible that it disproportionately affects women, and that we're not really able to sacrifice. I mean, like, I've heard multiple stories just in my own sphere. I'll give you an example. Someone told me a story yesterday about how someone left their partner. This is a male musician, left their partner and just went on tour and like left her with the kids to do that. I've heard that story over and over again. These are male colleagues that I have, that I work in and around. I know that I certainly don't have the luxury to do that. And you kind of get this sort of fictionalized story of this, like, the deadbeat dad who's like a musician. And as much as that story sucks and it's terrible for, the children and like the partner involved and all of that, there's another terrible story going on. And it means that women can't even ever think about, for the most part, ever being in a position where they'd be able to like leave their families and not take care of their kids or their aging parents or whatever. So you end up with numbers like, they make fun of me and my family to say this, but 9-1, where worse than science or worse than any other field, women are outnumbered as band leaders and instrumentalists, 9-1 in the industry. And it really strangely doesn't seem like that. Like, you'll go to something probably like Folk Alliance or other thing, and there'll be like a lot of women on the poster, and even, there seems to be this representation, but when you really break down the numbers of what's actually happening, go and think about it the next time that you go see shows. It'll be like a woman singer, and then everyone else in the band is a male, and there'll be like the major acts for a festival, will mostly be all men, and all men on stage, and mostly male engineers, and mostly men booking it. And, I want to act like it doesn't matter. I want to be like, okay, it doesn't matter. And like, why does it matter in terms of poetry, in terms of content? And the reason it matters is that when we turn on the radio and we hear music that's produced by men and decisions that are all made, we're really limiting the the kind of stories that we're hearing, because it really also affects original work. So, bless her, Taylor Swift is actually in a huge minority because she's producing and making and writing her own music. And I have to say, when I heard that song, I'm the Problem, It's Me, I didn't know that it was her, but I was like, well, those are really weird lyrics, really interesting. I couldn't believe that it was made by, a mainstream pop gal, but it has to do with the fact that she's really pushed forward to make her own stuff. And it's not always my cup of tea, but that it doesn't matter. When we're talking about people like Righteous Babe Records, like Ani DeFranco, and people who have really pushed forward to push their own narrative and their own story, if that's 9 to 1 and it's pressed into such a small voice, it affects young women and girls and what we think about ourselves, how we feel like seeing ourselves on stage and seeing what we can do, that we're not just always channeled into like just these kinds of instruments or these kinds of stories. And I don't know, I really didn't think of it as a big issue even 7 years ago. I'm thinking about it more as an issue as I'm becoming older and feeling that my stories are being limited. And, I don't know, I really want to hear more middle-aged women's songs and more older women's songs. And, I think also because we're performing and we're physically out there, that I'd be hard pressed to say, okay, yeah, I can't acknowledge the fact that I'm aware that maybe the world doesn't want to hear an older woman, sing as much as they want to hear like a hot babe young sing about something else. So it's complex to answer, but there's a problem with it for sure.
Your music is amazing. I love that folk Americana with jazz and blues influences. Oh my gosh, that's right down my alley. I mean, that's my go-to stuff. I'm very eclectic, so I'll listen to all kinds of things. But I've had some of your stuff on repeat.
Oh, thank you.
Gypsy Girl, I've listened to at least 10 times now. Yeah, so I love that. So you play multiple instruments, and you mentioned all strings primarily, right? So
yeah,
guitar, banjo, ukulele.
Jack of all trades, master of none. I've kind of yeah.
But beautiful stuff. Calvin also asked maybe make a comment about boundaries with colleagues. I don't even know where that one came from, but I don't know.
Well, it's more, I guess. Well, I mean, it's part of the feminist conversation. So there's at least 7 reasons I can think of off the top of my head that women are less in terms of numbers, in terms of being present in the music industry. But one of the reasons that goes into this massive dissertation, because it's multiple things, right, is that women break up bands. In some ways, is that their fault, or is that the fault of the environment that they're in? So if you're in a band with 5 guys, one of them's going to try to sleep with you at some point. Do you know what I'm saying? And that creates a conflict in the band. And that's like, is it your fault, or did someone try to shag you inappropriately? And we're talking on the spectrum of everything from like obviously highly consensual sex to not having consensual sex, or being put in positions where something happens to you on the road because your accommodations aren't great. Yeah. And these are working class stories. This is something for, a podcast. This isn't maybe stuff with higher echelons, but maybe it is too. I don't know everyone's story and everyone's behind the music. I've seen a few enough to know that probably the whole gamut of the spectrum, is like problematic through and through. Not great environments. I mean, I've had to sleep on a bunch of floors with a bunch of guys before. So the more successful you are, I guess I would imagine the more protected you are. But if you're in a van with dudes, things happen. So I guess it's the short way of saying that. Yeah. And I actually don't know any women musicians that don't have stories. Yeah. And I know a lot.
I have an African-American friend here in Kansas City who's a truck driver, and she gets put into settings with, kind of white blue collar dudes that, and it's like a similar, like what you just said is a similar kind of situation, so I think women in the workplace in a lot of different work environments bump into that kind of stuff. But then, when the intimacy of a band together, traveling together, on the road together, away from your maybe away from your partner, that kind of thing. It's certainly complements it, right? I mean,
well, and it means that too, in terms of income, like most women who are successful musicians, who are career by trade musicians presently, most of them are partnered with musicians because musicians understand what that life is like and they'll trust them. I haven't come across too many in my own life who have been able to be easily paired with a non-musician, and reasons that have come up have become that they're not as, their partner won't trust that they're on the road, and just like, you know what I mean? Like there's this kind of mistrust that goes on with what touring is like. And that's all legitimate and stuff. But I do notice that a bunch of male musicians seem to be paired with women who are not, and they're supported and trusted in that environment. And it's just like something recently I've kind of observed and picked up on and been like, and then again, how does that fall into like how easy this lifestyle is to choose? And then the bigger conversation of being like, is it a choice? Because did I choose what I'm good at or what my gift is? And like, why is it so difficult? There are places on the planet that support musicians in a different way, like Cuba and France, for instance, who like once you've proved that you can make a living, they kind of give you a stipend. So you're not having to go into environments or take gigs, and I'm sure there's problems with that, but I have known people, who have been in those environments who would prefer it. It's just kind of an interesting thing to think about how, like, as culture and community, a structured society, how we can help people and make it better. In Germany, I had, as a freelance artist, I had childcare, which hugely positively affected my life. That's not something I have here in Edinburgh, and it's not something you have in America. And considering the amount that we've just paid to like Ukraine or, all these things, you'd think that you'd want to be able to support people to, it doesn't end your career because you had a child. Yeah. No matter what that career is.
Oh my. Yeah. So, well, when you come to Kansas City, I know Calvin, he's been embedded in Kansas City for a while, and looking at these systemic issues with the art, we got an incredibly supportive artistic community, but it's really hard to break out from Kansas City because we're 8 hours away from, other big cities that make a tour hard to get to. You got to go 8 hours, Chicago or Nashville or Denver.
Big cities isn't where it's at anyway for touring artists. Every touring artist, and especially every working touring artist mother, will tell you the best thing people really can do, is if you have a house that can hold 40 people sitting on cushions, have a house concert, start to build something. We should not be at this place in our lives relying on venues or big cities. No one wants to go into low emission zones anymore. Like, all the things that are affecting working artists are like going into cities. Like, we want to go into more rural communities. We want to eat a home cooked breakfast. We want to connect with real people who are really gonna, we have to start to think of things in a different way, because people in small communities aren't necessarily less cultured than people living in big cities. And I think that when it comes to the political divide going on, particularly in the States, that misnomer, that sort of condescension, not that you're being condescending, but I'm just saying that sort of divide between like rural versus city and metropolis versus like the cowpoke thing. I'd rather like sit around and maybe explore what culture we can create in smaller communities. Certainly here in Scotland, there's hubs all over the place of beautiful little places where like you just get so well taken care of, and you just feel like you've connected a lot to people.
Well, I think that's exactly what Calvin's trying to do with Greenwood Social Hall. And, he's actually there now, and it's a venue that holds about 50 to 80 people. And, he's trying to do that very thing that you just described. So
Calvin Arsinia is a regular folk hero. And, I just think he's just a beautiful human, and people like him inspire other people like me to keep on keeping on, even when times are so tough and scary. And so it's really to his credit that I'm coming out in the first place. And he, was like, you should apply for this and do this, and has been so supportive. I can't even tell you. So thank you, Calvin, and thank you, Kansas City,
Which I think is
it's good to hear. It's really good to hear that like people are because it's a lot of people that get really involved in the church and stuff, and like your heart's in the right place and it's all good, but it becomes this kind of like game of never escaping the ego and stuff. So it's always like really inspiring for me to hear of people that were highly involved in the church that like are kind of rebuilding a new church and a new way of thinking, because we all do need a place to go.
Yeah.
For me, that is music. And I don't know, I like to have my own little altar work and my own yoga and vipassana and stuff like that. But I'm a little church phobic on account of the whole recovering Catholic thing. But
I am too. And here I am.
I'm sure.
Here I'm pastoring again. I'm like, oh shit.
Well, I mean, obviously with a podcast and stuff as well, though, you can reach a lot of people. And I think that's a beautiful thing, is it's mostly like, I don't know. I mean, I would also say I do. Catholics never proselytize, which is something that I actually think is cool. Like they don't, go and if they do missionary work, they're never trying to convert.
Yeah.
Which is something a lot of people don't know about that. But
right.
I always really liked that song that you'd sing in church that was like, they'll know we're Christians by our love, as opposed to the fact that we're telling them and that we're trying to change them and all of that kind of thing. So it's something to kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
For me,
if you've heard of Richard Rohr, he's a Franciscan father who is actually, he's still alive, but he's battling cancer and stuff. But he's been he's very into, anyway, it's kind of the new crowd I'm hanging out with.
A new crew.
very, very progressive kind of integration of probably mindful Buddhist traditions with evolution, with some Jesus stuff as well, sprinkled in, kind of thing. So anyway.
Jesus is great.
Yeah.
But, it's just weird that it went from that to like, no women leadership. I just read a really interesting book that I wish I could remember the name of it. That's how interesting it was. It was like, I'll have to send it to you, but it's basically about like the ties of Dionysian cults in Nazareth, and like that, Jesus is actually probably tied to like Greek paganism, and women leadership and Mary Magdalene, all this kind of stuff. And like, I don't know, this guy went to the Vatican and like found a needle in a haystack and dug up all kinds of really interesting ties. And, but it has to do with like psychedelic wine and all kinds of, I mean, it was just a crazy journey.
Yeah.
Are you into that?
I've interviewed a gal that does plant medicine, and we talked about a lot of that kind of interesting stuff. But yeah, well, thanks so much for joining. I appreciate your time, and I'll look forward to, I'll be there when you arrive in Kansas City. So I look forward to meeting you in person. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. And Cera, we'll see you in Kansas City soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks for having me. I look forward to being at Folk Alliance and seeing Calvin and yourself and getting to play for y'all. So thank you.
Excellent.
Gypsy girl, gypsy babe, you got it made. Take me with you where you go, so I can know the pleasure that you feel every day. Gypsy babe, I'll be your slave. I'll be the one who makes sure that you get paid. I'll be the one, make sure you get paid. Where we gonna go? How we gonna get there? Don't you know how to feel the flow? Find the wind in your hair. Wave your arms like you just don't care. She said she'd take me there. Said I wanna go. Where's my gypsy girl?
Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.